It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and we're in trouble. We're receiving a visit from the Time Cops, but it's not Captain Braxton or even Jean-Claude Van Damme from the 1994 movie, but rather Rocksteady and Bebop here. They want to know all about our recent shenanigans, and it's up to Cisco to prove we didn't shit the temporal bed. Flashback time, and we're on our way to Cardassia. They've got a Bajoran orb, one that accidentally fell into their pockets during the occupation, so we're off to fetch it and make sure it's real. We're also offering a taxi service while there. A human trader got caught on Cardassia when the recent Klingon unpleasantness kicked off and is catching a lift back to the Federation with us. So far, so good, and we set off back for home. Nothing's that simple, though, and the Defiant experiences some technical oopsies along the way, ones that coincide with a golden light that looks curiously like the one accompanying orb visions. Systems come back online, and we're able to turn sneaky bastard mode back on again, presumably while giving another mental middle finger to the agreement we've made with the Romulans. Odd thing, though, we're not where we're supposed to be according to sensors, and from the looks of things, we're not when we're supposed to be either. This is Starfleet, and something's gone wrong, so it's time for a meeting. Our passenger is not who he said he was. In fact, he's not even human. He's a Klingon surgically altered to look human, which would explain the stunned guard protecting our orb cargo just before we had our little space-time hiccup, and the unexplained teleport shortly after. This lad's name is Arne Darwin. At least that's the name on record for him, as it's not the first time he's come to the attention of Starfleet. To be fair, we can't blame our security for not recognizing him, as the last encounter was over 100 years back. Unsurprisingly, that's the time we're in now, and we're at the space station where none other than Captain James T. Kirk uncovered a plot by past Darwin, posing as a diplomatic aide, to undermine a Federation colony. The kerfuffle caused past Darwin's disgrace and subsequent exile, and after an unpleasant life as a rogue trader, he got trapped on Cardassia, where we assume he heard about a certain magical god rock with time powers, the one we were transporting. All of which leaves us with a grudge-fueled spy who now has a chance to prevent his downfall, and our lot with the task of stopping him. And that means going over to both the Enterprise and the station, while blending in, to find the bugger. Twin teams of Bashir O'Brien and Cisco Dax scour the Enterprise and deal with a culture shock that Dax is best equipped to handle as her hosts live through it, while Odo checks out the station. He's the first to find a clue, albeit accidentally. He tries to order a Klingon coffee, only to be told they don't serve it, and that he's the second person to ask. The other guy matches the description of Darwin and said he'd return, which makes Odo's job a whole lot easier as well as significantly more comfortable. He's even able to watch a shady git give a pet to Uhura from the Enterprise while he waits. Worf joins him shortly after to discover Odo now has a pet of his own, and one that really doesn't care for Worf. Understandable when you think about it. He tells Odo Tribbles are a sworn enemy of the Klingon Empire and will have been made extinct by the end of the century they're in now. Speaking of Klingons, one of their ships has just turned up. Not to worry, as once it's identified, Dax recognizes the name and says it's the ship of one of her old Klingon friends, Koloth, a lad that we saw back in Season 2, along with Kang and Kor. He told her about a meeting with Kirk back in the old days and how he wished they'd fought, so we know this doesn't come to blows. Dax wants to go over to the station for a chance to see him in his youth, though Cisco has the good sense to send Bashir and O'Brien there instead. Once Bashir's finished having an existential crisis about a woman he's just met potentially being his ancestor, and one with a rumor of a mysterious suitor who fathered her child, they teleport away before he has the chance to do literal time fuckery. As plans to keep out of trouble go, it's a spectacular disaster. They arrive shortly before a bar brawl with some past Klingon starts, though Worf does at least have the chance to decline explaining the discrepancy in appearance. Odo stays out of it, which means he's the only one not busy when Darwin appears at the door. He and Worf are able to pursue, but Bashir and O'Brien are collared by security. While they're getting chewed out by Kirk, Odo and Worf are hauling a captured Darwin back to the Defiant. Not that he's particularly bothered by developments. He's already made sure that Kirk will die. Darwin's using the old sticker bomb up a Tribble's arse to kaboom Kirk gambit apparently, something he thinks appropriate given that a Tribble is how Kirk discovered he was secretly a Klingon to begin with. Whether Darwin volunteered this information or it was extracted through other means is not mentioned. A slight problem, those tribbles multiply more than a randy maths teacher, which means we have rather a lot of them to scan. Checking the ones on the Enterprise is a simple enough job at least. Starfleet security being shit isn't a recent thing, so we just mosey on up to the bridge and scan the whole ship using internal sensors. The station is a more serious problem though, as they know how to lock a door. That means we can't access critical systems like sensors, and we'll have to scan each tribble manually. Dax has lived long enough to understand working smarter is superior to working harder. If this thing's meant to kaboom Kirk, we'll just stick with him and see where he's going. It's a somewhat flawed plan, as it means we'll be there when it's due to explode, but thanks to overhearing Kirk mention he's going to check some grain storage on the station, we get there first. On the plus side, we don't have to worry about these tribbles making more due to most of them being dead. The grain they've fed on is poisoned, you see, that being past Darwin's original plan to bugger this colony. Kirk arrives as they're checking dead tribbles for explosives, meaning they don't have much longer. Just as well that Sisko finds it then, and after calling the Defiant to teleport it outside the station, it kabooms. If anybody on those ships or the station happened to notice an explosion just to the side of them, they had the courtesy to not mention it. History has been saved. Kirk uncovers past Darwin as a Klingon, Kira figures out how to use the magic god rock to get us back home, and all's well that ends well. Sort of, anyway. Sisko admits that he made a slight detour before returning to the Defiant. You're not a real Starfleet captain unless you've pissed on the temporal prime directive at least once, and meeting Kirk seemed like the best chance he was going to get. Curiously, Bebop and Rocksteady don't take a particularly dim view of this. Okay, it was needlessly dangerous and risked deleting their entire timeline, but it's Kirk, and none of these actors here would have a job without him. Off they go to file their report, seemingly of the opinion that no real harm was done. That's because they didn't visit the promenade while they were here, where we have a slight crisis developing after carrying home a stowaway. At least it wasn't a whale, I guess, so we'll leave the crew of DS9 to wonder how we're going to slaughter them all like we did those space voles until the next adventure. It's the 30th anniversary episode, or one of them to be more specific. We covered Voyager's flashback before we started including these autopsy reports at the end, but viewers would still have been able to note that I did not have a lot of time for it. Commercialized nostalgia is something of which I'm always wary, and I think the fact that both of these stories originated due to an edict from Paramount executives rather than organic interest by the people writing scripts is rather telling. All of which sounds potentially worrying for those of you who are fond of today's episode. Rest assured, then, that I consider this one superior, which is to say that I think it's perfectly serviceable. I'm not convinced it's near the apex of Deep Space Nine like its ratings suggest, but I do get why other people would feel that way. Those of you who've been here for a while will know that I don't have much patience for time travel stories, so let's get that out of the way by saying this story dodges all the worst offenders on that count. There's no big red reset button which renders the last 45 minutes irrelevant, which to my mind is the largest sin such a story can commit. We also don't waste screen time trying to explain the reason behind it all happening beyond magic god rock. The Doctor Who approach of just getting on with it proved this was superior 3 years before even the original series of Trek, so it's pleasing when writers accept that getting bogged down in the science bollocks just makes things worse. We wanted to go back and visit Kirk, so we did. The how is just window dressing, and any window dressing which gets in the way of what you're selling is pretty shit at the job. It's a technical success too. Things mesh very well, at least from the standpoint of a mid-90s TV show. It's not as seamless as you could get now, of course, because that's how tech works, but in the context of a show that was just on the cusp of the affordable digital revolution, it's very impressive. Affordable is, of course, a relative term in this case, as it was still hideously expensive. Even the fact that this story was created due to a prompt from executives didn't stop those behind the scenes getting fully on board once things got going. It's clear that everybody involved was very interested in getting things feeling as though they fit in with what came before. The attention to detail is truly impressive, and I can't fault the dedication of those wishing to do justice to the original series, many of whom were motivated into their careers as a result of that show. Indeed, Dax's enthusiasm when on the Enterprise is a deliberate insertion of vicarious pleasure from the writers themselves. And that reverence for what came before is, ironically, part of the problem. It feels like a fan exploration of the past more than a story in its own right, and that's destined to fall short for those who aren't wearing their nostalgia goggles. Appreciating a technical achievement is all well and good, and it's clear everybody put in a lot of hours to make it look right, but a pretty show with only a passable story is putting the cart before the horse in my eyes. There was no real hook beyond, look at all this old stuff, and for me, that's a hook with no bait. It may surprise some of you watching to learn that I do not live and breathe Star Trek, despite it quite literally being my job. If you step back and think about it though, that makes sense. People who work at McDonald's don't spend their time at home making batches of the secret sauce. That's for when they're on the clock. Indeed, it's that level of separation that I'd argue allows me to view these things objectively, or as objectively as you can do when you've committed to talking about nearly 200 episodes of a show from a quarter of a century ago. Nobody's going to do that without at least a passing interest, and I do have books on the topic along with a smattering of merch, but my spare time is spent thinking about other things. All of which is to say that I'm not sure I qualify as what you'd call a fan, at least in the traditional context of it being short for fanatic. And maybe that means this one wasn't for me. It is, after all, a love letter to something that I merely like, and perhaps that's a valid point to consider when you weigh my opinion. Besides, when you consider my lack of nostalgia for the whole thing, the fact that I still enjoyed an episode which is unashamedly reverential is itself a compliment. I may not think it belongs in my personal top 10, but there's enough here to appreciate what it's doing. Well, mostly. There was one aspect of the show that I found needlessly jarring. The temporal investigation agents of Dulmer and Luxley are anagrams, if we're being alphabetically generous, of Mulder and Scully from the X-Files. This rubbed me the wrong way when I heard them, so I took the time to consider why. My conclusion is that they serve as nothing more than what they are, a reference. The only tenuous link is that they're a pair of characters investigating something. Their names add nothing to the story and have no reason to be present, beyond a writer simply wanting to put them in with little care to whether they fit. That's why I called them Rocksteady and Bebop in the summary. If you're going to throw in names without consideration for how appropriate they are in context, then let's at least have some fun with it. For those of you who've been here a while, that might sound like a familiar gripe. I've had a dislike of the number 47 for as long as this channel's been posting videos, and this falls into the same category. It's a reference with no bearing on the established universe, one slammed in simply for the gratification of the writer. In a way, it's a bit like the difference between a traditional spoof movie such as Airplane and something like Scary Movie. The former treads a line of parody and pastiche for a whole genre of film with knowing nods to key aspects. The latter is a series of popular culture references wearing glasses and a moustache. There's a reason why one of them is considered a classic and the other less so. My point is that if you're going to reference something, consider the context. You're already in a franchise with multiple different series full of options. Hell, if we're making this as a love letter to the original series, wouldn't calling them Solo and Herb not have been a fitting tribute to the guy largely responsible for the show getting greenlit in the first place? Sticking in a nod to something completely different just because it was popular at the time creates an already weak link that's only going to worsen the older it gets. Ultimately, if you're watching this video, you likely already have an opinion on the episode. If you were hoping I'd lavish praise on it, then you might be disappointed that I didn't. If you believe that Trials and Tribble-Ations is the pinnacle of Deep Space Nine, then there's even a chance you think I'm being deliberately contrarian. If, however, you've been here for a while, you've hopefully learned that I say things because I believe them. This episode is by no means bad, but if you watch it on its own merits rather than as a celebration of what came before, I think you'd struggle to find a reason why it deserves a place among the episodes that best showcase what DS9 has to offer. End of episode.
Are you sure about this?
Yes, it'll be fine.
Only I ask 'cause this is the 17th time we've reinstalled Windows.
The others were just learning experiences. Now I know what I'm doing.
Not to be negative, but you have been saying that for the last couple of attempts.
And I've taken that on board. I've got complex probability calculation software stored in this skull.
Then why did you do—
Look, it's ready, alright?
Alright, lad, you're the expert. How do we do this then?
We just click on the bit. Fuck you, you fucking fuck.
Steady on, lad. He's gonna have to start bleeping him if you keep that up.
Goddamned backwards ass machine. The whole thing falls over if you look at it wrong. How the hell did anybody keep these systems running back then?
Probably because the promise of free pornography is a strong motivator. Oh.